The world is urbanizing, China is urbanizing, and China is also at the center of the 21st century world. We don't know whether on today's data, China already is the world's largest economy. Some indicators suggest so, but if not today, it will be next year or the year after, very, very soon. And China certainly is the center of urban civilization. The current estimate is about 125 cities, urban agglomerations of over 1 million people. And I had an experience which really dramatized it for me, exactly the question that the president of ECOSOC, Martin Seidig, asked. I was asked by Deputy Premier Zheng Peiyan about a dozen years ago to visit the Western Chinese cities when China was developing its Western Development Plan. And I spent 2 years off and on visiting a number of cities. And one evening we arrived with my wife at a metropolis that was dazzling, and there was a huge plaza, people were out strolling, beautiful stores, cultural buildings, a kind of Times Square, neon lights, and it was stunning, this city. And I turned to my wife and I said, you know, it's also interesting, we never even heard of this city this morning. And this was a city of 7 million people. And so we don't really know, outsiders, we can't feel the scale of this urban civilization, of this network of great cities and how they're taking shape. The numbers are really startling. They even surpass China's own growth rate, which is the fastest in world history. China has been doubling roughly every 7 years since 1978. And that means that there have been roughly 5 doublings, or 2 to the 5th power, in other words, about a 32-time increase of the scale of an economy of 1.3 billion people. It's an achievement that is unparalleled in all of economic history. But the cities are growing even faster, because the cities are becoming a rising proportion of that remarkably dynamic country. And as Patrick Ho just told you, if you think about it, in 1950 there were 65 million people in China's cities. And as of today, about 750 million. And the estimate by the government is that by 2020, another 100 million will join the cities. That, after all, is the plan. That by 2020, another 100 million. I was with the Minister of Japan yesterday, and we were discussing this pace and noted that that's one whole Japan added to the cities by the year 2020. It's absolutely mind-boggling. And as a percentage of the population, from about 12% in 1950 to around 60% as of 2020, this has never been experienced before. But it's obviously raising huge questions, how to do this. Economic growth is one matter, quality of life is another matter. And we know that China is really experiencing huge questions on quality of life, massive air and water pollution, massive challenges of urban infrastructure, very significant questions which have led the Chinese government recently to make these wonderful pronouncements of putting sustainable development at the very core of China's strategy. And I think that this is a brilliant move, and also one that is really a guide for the whole world. And I'm also extraordinarily gratified that China has become the leader in calling for urban sustainability at the center of the Sustainable Development Goals. We really need this. We need a clear, sustainable, urban sustainability as one of the SDGs. One of the things that this will do will be to signal to mayors and city governments all over the world, this means you. Sustainable development means you. You have responsibilities at the local level. to help solve problems. No national government can solve the problems of its cities. The cities need to take action, they need to lead, but they need a direction of sustainability. What kind of city? It has to be a new kind, and that's the word of new type. Urbanization is exactly right. The tradition of development over the last 2 centuries is follow the country ahead, or follow the lead ahead. But if China creates 130 Los Angeleses, this will be intolerable for China's well-being. It will mean the world's greatest traffic jam in history. It will be unmanageable from an environmental point of view. But it is a real risk in a way, because in the 21st century, city has meant automobile city. And automobile city, we are finding in the United States, doesn't fit the 21st century. And this means, I think, that all of us really need to rethink some of the basic premises of urbanization over the past half century. There is almost no part of the world that isn't suffering massive congestion, air pollution, traffic jams, spending hours to and from airports or crossing town in automobiles now. And the question is whether we really can, whether China can afford an economy with 1 billion vehicles along the lines of the United States. The US can't afford it. Who can? Nobody, because the consequences environmentally, personally, in quality of life really would suffer massively. I'm happy that this city, home to the United Nations, gives some indications, because New York stands out uniquely among American cities as the city with the least ownership of automobiles. I can tell you at a personal level, when I moved from Boston after being at Harvard University for 30 years, one of the greatest joys was no cars. I didn't have to have any automobiles, our children, nobody, period. Because this is a city where you walk. This is a city with public transportation. This is a city where you can grab a taxi. This is a city where you don't depend on the personal ownership of vehicles, and many cities are moving in this direction now. This is a city also that was extremely lucky that in 1811, city planners sat down when it was all farmland on this island, and there was a small settlement at the southern tip of the island, and they rather hubristically drew a map with grid lines that went all the way up the island of Manhattan and cross lines, and gave us the gridded city that we have today, with a very substantial part of the city devoted to public space of roads, places where people can walk, a city that really is a joy for walking, where you have eye delight. You don't want to get in a car, you want to walk. Blocks, miles, in fact. And we can thank the planners 203 years ago for that very smart development. They made the roads wide enough for a carriage led by horses to turn a U-turn. And it turned out to be just good enough for automobiles that they couldn't imagine later on. So how a city is designed, the density of settlement, the higher the density, generally the higher the quality of life, the more energy efficiency, the more access to services. Sprawling, low-density cities give us not only the congestion, but massive greenhouse gas emissions. They're the kinds of cities that I grew up in. I'm a Detroiter by nature, believe me. When you grow up in the Motor City, you're not allowed to have public transport. The automakers ensured no public transport. So when I grew up, I thought that the most natural thing in life was, no matter what you want to do, get in a car and drive someplace. And then get in a car and drive another place, and then get in a car again. And it was only many years later that I realized that wasn't normal, that was very abnormal. But this is a choice that cities really face. So what does it mean to be sustainable in the 21st century? We have to find a new way, and thankfully China is going to help to lead that, because whatever China puts its mind to, it solves, and it solves brilliantly and beautifully. And so I'm extremely gratified by China taking on this challenge of building the new type city for the 21st century. I would suggest a few of the following points. On transport, we had better be in compact, densely settled cities where we can walk, where we can use public transportation, and that are absolutely convenient for electric vehicles in the future. Because the internal combustion engine, I will predict, will go the way of history within the next 20 years. We can't afford a world of internal combustion engines, because if we have 2 billion vehicles of the current type, there is no way we can keep climate safety in this world. We need to decarbonize the transport system. The only way to do that is through public transportation, walking, bicycling, electric vehicles. It's all within reach, but it needs planning. It needs design. It needs the infrastructure that can accommodate this. And I think that this is a tremendous opportunity. China, no doubt, it's already the world's largest automobile market in the world. It can also be the leader in electric vehicles. And when I was in Delhi just 2 days ago, I was told that within the last year or two, 1 million small electric vehicles have come from China. These are the three-wheelers that are so popular in Delhi. Now there has been a huge intake just within the last couple of years of Chinese electrified rickshaws, they call them, the three-wheelers. And this, I think, is the way that it will go quite quickly for all of us. Second is waste management. I was delighted to learn from the EU Commissioner for the Environment, Mr. Potočnik, this morning about the decision of the Commission to adopt specific, bold targets for a circular economy for the management of waste within the European Union. This is a great advance, and what it means is, of course, an entirely new way of thinking about urban metabolism. It's not just filling land that destroys land, that creates methane emissions, that has huge social and health, environmental, and economic costs. It's recycling the primary commodities, it's composting organic material, it's recycling glass and metals, and it's producing electricity from waste as well in a sustainable manner. So a circular economy in waste management is also something that has lagged for a long time, but now it's understood that this is vital. A third area is net zero emission buildings. We know now, because they've been designed all over the world, that the very heavy energy that we now deploy for heating, air conditioning, and ventilation can be reduced dramatically through better design of buildings, better airlocks, better insulation, use of natural ventilation, use of solar paneling, proper orientation to tap into sunshine, water heating systems, recycling of water and waste within the buildings. We can dramatically reduce the energy demands in the building sector, both residential and commercial. And the fourth area that I would mention is, of course, the power sector. Energy needs fundamentally to be decarbonized in future years. We will kill ourselves on CO2 emissions if we continue with business as usual. The evidence is overwhelming. I was just reporting in EcoSoc a few minutes ago my experience in the last 6 months. I've been in 28 countries in the last 6 months. Every country I've been in, is in the middle of an ecological crisis. Drought, floods, massive heat waves, monsoon failures, water reservoirs not filling anymore. And this is when we're only at roughly 1 degree C above the pre-industrial level. If we reach 2 degrees C, not only will we have climate catastrophe, but we have the risk of runaway climate change also, as the melting permafrost releases vast amounts of methane or carbon dioxide, or the oceans degas, or the changing albedo on the Earth's surface means massive further positive amplification of the human-induced climate change. So we have to move to a low-carbon economy, and that starts with low-carbon electricity. The choices are ample. China is taking major steps forward, but it's going to have to do a lot more. What are the choices? The choices, of course, are renewable energy, wind and solar power, hydropower, nuclear power, and carbon capture and sequestration. This is the list. And we have to find a way within that list for every economy to find its energy needs. Without energy, there's no development, no modern economy. On the other hand, with fossil fuel energy, there's no future for the planet. And so we have over the next 30 years to make a decisive transformation. For China, I deeply hope that carbon capture and sequestration can work at a significant scale. This would be the #1 option for China because it's a coal-based economy. And we should do everything possible to try to make that work. Because if it does work, it's hugely important. But we actually don't know the geology at this point. We don't know the storage capacity. We don't know the industrial costs of different approaches to this. So one of the things that I'm strongly urging is that as part of next year's climate agreement in December 2015, the world's major economies, the United States, China, the European Union, Japan, Korea, Canada, Australia, all agree to a massive scale up of research and development around low carbon energy. This is vital for the well-being of the planet, yet we don't invest in it. We're investing in deep sea drilling, we're investing in fracking, we're investing in many enormously ingenious ways to find new hydrocarbons. And the hydrocarbon industry should be applauded. It's technologically advanced, it's sophisticated, and it's relentless. And it will kill us in the end if we don't understand the carbon budget. And so the cities in China and in the United States and in every part of the world need to be powered by nearly zero carbon emitting power generation. It's possible. We have a new report that we have released today in the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, and I'm just coming from a press conference with the Secretary General called Pathways to Deep Decarbonization. There's a wonderful country chapter by a Chinese team at Tsinghua University. There are wonderful reports from 15 countries on how this can be done. The US chapter shows that the US should and can reduce its emissions by 90% by the middle of the century, and this is America's responsibility to the world, in my opinion. But it's feasible because we have the resources to do it. We have the technology to do it. But we need to make a cooperative effort to bring all of this together. And that's what I think is in the works and what China's leaders are telling the world.